lovely church as you see it today wasn't always like this. And the history goes back to 1783, when Father Reid was appointed as the first priest for this parish at that time called Strathaila. And he lived in a small house with a wee chapel attached at a place called Kemp Cairn on the edge of Keith, which was pretty poor accommodation. And that was our church for 40 odd years until Father Walter Lovey arrived in 1825. And Father Lovey is a man of tremendous energy and skills. So he moved to a small chapel on Land Street in 1827 and set about raising money for this. Now, Keith was never a very rich place, but he had a big ally in Charles X of France. Now, the French had a revolution and decapitated all King Louis and all his sons apart from Charles, who got refuge here. And Charles came to Keith, and he was most impressed with the people of Keith, who he said lined the streets and cheered when he arrived, and Father Lovey was his confessor. So the French had another revolution. Charles went back to be Charles X of France, and Father Lovey went over to Paris and asked him for money. He gave the money for building our church. And he also arranged for his court painter, Francois Dubois, to paint our magnificent picture, The Incredulity of St. Thomas, which was completed in 1829. But we didn't get it, because although we had the money, the French had another revolution, and we couldn't get our hands on the painting. So Father Lovey, in December 1830, went over to Paris again, in the middle of the revolution, grabbed the painting and brought it home. But we didn't get the frame for several years later. So he's now got the money, and he built that church, which at that time was just a straightforward oblong, based on a church in Rome, Santa Maria degli Angeli, and it was opened in August 1831. Then, at that time, there was no accommodation for the priest. So in 1837, there were some more developments. We built the priest's house, which is at the back. Between 1831 and 1837, Father Lovey lived in the little John Ogilvie room, and he had a ladder going up into what is just behind the organ loft. But in 1837, he had his own accommodation. We then built the bell tower, the little belfry on the top, and large stone statues of St. Peter and Paul were put up on the facade. Eventually, they succumbed to the Keith weather and had to be taken down. So now the church carried on until 1910, when Monsignor MacDonald arrived. Another dynamic and energetic priest who opened the church hall in 1910, although it says over the stained glass window 1912, that's when it was officially opened, and he set about expanding our church. The capacity of 300 people was insufficient by then. So he expanded out for the two side wings here, and these oak pews were put in, and the capacity was now 500 people. And that was opened in September 1916 with this magnificent copper dome. The church then continued in that form through until really 1977, when Vatican II meant we took away the altar rails and the pulpit and altered the church to what it is today. The only other significant developments since then have been twice we've had to replace the copper dome because of wear and tear, which is something we'd rather not have done. But today we have our magnificent church. It's cruciform, still seats 500 people, still with our oak pews, and the marvellous state of restoration that it's in today.